Well, for those of y'all who don't know me, welcome to the page. This is me, Jordan Pierre. What I do is I typically talk about media. And what I want to talk to us today about is a show that I watched on Apple TV called Chiefs of War. And I'm not too sure if any of y'all watched it, but it's a great show. Like, I love the show. I ain't going to lie. Like, I'm not even here to make the video necessarily to knock the producing. I love this show. They reeled me in because I sat there and I watched the trailer, and then they do allow you to watch one episode before you have to purchase like the season, or at least purchase subscription in order for you to watch the full season in itself. And they reeled me in. I watched the first episode. I was like, oh yeah, this is one of my shows. This is for all my people that love Game of Thrones, Troy, Sparta 300, whoever love these type of movies. This is your type of show, right? And I love the show. And what it is, it's a show that is telling about the story of a unification of like Hawaiian islands before the colonialization. And it's interesting to me because when I was watching the show, they had various people from indigenous tribes that was depicted as like their warriors. One of them name was Kahiana, right? And that's the image of Kahiana right here. And when I remember when I'm watching the show, matter of fact, let me pull up. Let me share screen. My man Kahiana. This is him here. So they had one of the people. He was him in the show. He was him, and I'm not gonna lie to you. It's him right here. Like he was one of them, and I remember seeing him watching the show, and all I could think about is like, imagine if this show was written from the perspective of African civilization or African nations. Like I often sit there and think about the power of media in shaping identity, but also just empowering a demographic that looks like the images to which they consuming and who they are, who they once were. Like for those that may have come from these indigenous Hawaiian civilizations, tribes, right? And I don't want to be disrespectful if that's not the right terminology to describe what's taking place there. Like for them to see that, they at least could say, while this may not be the accurate depiction of historical events or the exact names of our warriors or the people that played the pivotal role in their history, they can at least look at the show and say, yo, we come from a lineage of warriors. And I think about like, what if there was a show that was created that took from the perspective of African nations and who we were prior to colonialization? Like, I think one of the most detrimental things, and I saw this quote on Pinterest, it said, one of the most detrimental things to the Black race or African Americans is that we have forgotten who we were prior to contact with European nations. We often don't talk about the state of Africa or what was or who were Black people prior to even slavery. Like, I feel like we talk about slavery and we never talk about who we were prior to that. And I looked at this show and I sat and I thought about, I'm like, yo, I only could imagine if there was a show like Chiefs of War from an African perspective that showed Black warriors. Like, I like Kayana. The other one name was Kamahi Mahi. And I'm not going to lie, like, I'm watching this show and I'm like, I want to be in that movie. I want to be one of them. And I know that if I seen Black people as that, what that could do for our children. And I don't think because we live in a time period where it's just so many images that people are consuming. We have social media, various podcasts, people just pushing out a lot of narratives and messages. I don't think we often sit down and think about the power of imagery and what images do to a child. Because some people may say, oh, at a certain age, you should have the discernment to be able to tell what's entertainment from what's not, or be able to discern what it is that you consume. But that's not necessarily true. And I don't want to say that adults, or because of your age, that you necessarily are exempt from being influenced by images. I think we influence even more, but definitely our children. For many times, we see that a big part of our socialization in the understanding of not just how we navigate our communities, but how we think that we are perceived by the world is based on the images conveyed through us through media. And it often teaches how we feel like we need to be in order to make it in this world. So when I look at this show, I sat there and I thought, I'm like, yo, imagine if this show was ran from an African perspective that showed African nations, civilizations, Black men and women as warriors, and show how, because the show doesn't like exclude the tribal wars. It doesn't say that, but it does also talk about when the Europeans came to this Hawaiian island and how they seen the natural resources that exist, really like the trees, the forest, and they seen those trees like, wow, this can be used to create what paper, wood, housing. They thought of industrialization. They thought about commodifying natural resources. And you seen Kayana like, nah, don't bring them here no more. Them people are evil. I seen what they did when I traveled to the European nations, when I went to the Western world and seen how their civilization and what they do to their people and how they treat nature. And he said, don't bring the people here again because they are evil. And I thought about, I'm like, yo, imagine if we show images of what Africa was like, right? We can add the wars that existed, but definitely show that we had warriors, that we had kings, right? That I don't want to just show us as like this enslaved people, for we was much more than just that, and we definitely did revolt. But I thought about that, and I was like, yo, I would love to see somebody come together and produce a show as such that depicts what Africa was like or what Black people was like prior to the interaction with colonization. Because a lot of things have been misconstrued, misinterpreted, have been stripped, have been, what's the word, omitted from texts, from historical books and documentations of who Black people were prior to slavery. And now the only images that we are being portrayed as is a people that history started in 1916, a people that's only good for entertainment, that's only good as athletes, that's only good as a source of amusement. But yet we don't talk about how we were the top scholars, or the first scholars, the nations to civilize others, the one in which Greeks came to Egypt in order to learn things as such. And I felt like if we were able to create shows, we lived during a time period with AI, and I'm trying to use Sora. So if anybody know how to use that, I definitely will seek your assistance. But just I thought about it, like, imagine if we started to find ways to create shows that re-empowered and told the stories of who we were prior to slavery. So that we could see that we too were warriors, that we wasn't just this divided nation. That's not necessarily true, and how powerful those images could be. So I just want to create that message. Like, imagine if the Chiefs of War show was from an African perspective. And I love to hear y'all comments. If anybody that want to work on that, I'm definitely in that realm of assisting with directing, even being an actor. Like, I love to be one of the warriors. I sit there like, come here, come here, come here. I'll be there. I'll train, exercise, whatever you need me to do. But I definitely want to put that message out there for those that watch shows and consume media to the extent that I do, and ever thought, like, what if these shows was created in a manner to which it showed a Black perspective, and what would that do for Black youth to be able to see themselves as warriors, as kings of nations, as those that weren't always divided, those that came together, those that knew how to fight, that trained. I thought that would just be dope, and to see what Africa was like before we met the European idolization or ideology of capitalism. Like, we seen nature, and I want to say this too. I seen a clip on Instagram, and a woman said she was going around a table, I guess, to different men. Or it was actually a table full of women of different ethnicities, and they went to each woman of different ethnicity, asked them what do they mean contribute to society. And they was like China. They went to Chinese people, stereotypical to some extent, and it was like the Chinese people said we provide the sciences or technology. They went to like Asians. They was like, yeah, we provide the technology. We went to Mexicans. They said we do construction. They went to the Black woman. They was like, what do your men contribute? And they was like, what is it that Black men contribute? And I sat there, I thought about it. I was like, damn, I think they were trying to measure the contribution of Black men in a manner to which we could monetize or put some type of monetary value to it. And I sat there and was like, but imagine if we show well, the first to even address that is that there was a time period where we didn't measure the value of nature and our resources or one's contribution based solely on monetary value system, right? So I even thought about that. Like, you may be saying that we don't contribute enough, but that's not necessarily true. For we the first to be the sciences, the first to understand irrigation system, the first to understand agriculture, farming, the first to go about holistic healing, understanding nature and its remedies and how it can be used to heal a body, holistic healing, things as such. So to think that if you was to say, like, what industry do Black men own, to measure us that way is like, I think that's a not just a single narrative story, but a dangerous narrative to push, right? But I just thought about that, like, what was Africa prior to capitalism? Was nature something that we seem to be on? Like the fact that people, when they had the fires in Los Angeles, there was some individual that owned the water reserves. Like, how did you own? How does an individual own the water reserve, bro? Things that we just normalized. Like, we never even asked ourselves, like, how could someone own water? That's crazy. But we sat there and we commoditized everything. It was like, let's own the land, let's own the water, let's own the trees, let's own. And nature wasn't something that we were supposed to take ownership over. And I would just love to see a show that show what Africa was, what is that we contributed before we even seen capitalism, how life was, right? Wars without guns. And people actually had to fight. That's another thing that's shown in the show. Like when Europeans came, they came with guns. And they met these civilizations that was fighting with spears and swords. And in many instances, they felt like those white men were soft. They're like, y'all coming here with guns, let me see you fight. But the men didn't have to fight because they had guns. It's like, I will shoot you. I don't have to throw no spear. I'm not fighting y'all. Y'all well trained. Right? It's like to see what was life like before we even was introduced to the gun, and what did the introduction of the European gun do to African nations. But then in the show, Chief of War, Kayana, he actually went to the West, right? So he learned how to use a gun. He came back to the Hawaiian Islands and taught them because he knew that the Europeans was going to come back. And he's like, yo, if we going to fight against them, we going to definitely need to learn how to use their weapons. But I just wanted to see, like, what would a show look like to show what Africa was before we interact with European nations, before we even heard about the gun, to even talk about what did colonialization do to Africa. And I thought that'd be dope. So I just want to put that message out there. And I also want to encourage y'all to go watch the show. For those that seen this video, go watch the show. And let's have a conversation around. Leave your comments below. But I'm going to definitely start to break down certain shows that I'm watching, certain movies that I consume. I believe that a lot of messages are being implemented into the movies, shows, and independent films that's being created. And often we go to theaters seeking the entertainment, and we often leave the message there. Or sometimes there's certain shows that we just never seen. And it's not until someone like myself may speak upon it, or another reference that you may have that you're like, oh, word, I never seen that show. Let me go watch it. So I'm going to use my platform for such, and then create my podcast where I bring those behind me to talk about the films they've seen and the content to which they create. So leave your comments, subscribe. Let's continue to build, y'all.